Good evening and welcome to the Denver City Council Debates, a joint production of Colorado Public Television and AARP. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. We continue our series of debates looking at the open seats for the Denver City Council. Tonight we will feature all 9 candidates running for Denver's District 7. For our first half hour, we will meet 5 of the candidates, and please stay tuned to hear from the other 4 at 7:30. I will tell you that we would love to have had all 9 on the stage, but just this being public television, we didn't have 10 microphones, so we went with the 5 and 4 format. So please stay tuned for the entire hour. Joining us for the next 30 minutes are Mateos Alvarez, Lucia Brown, Jolyn Clark, Aaron Greco, and Ian Hardwick. Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We do have limited time, so let's get right to it. I'd like to ask each of you to take 1 minute to answer this question. An affordable public transportation system is vital to a livable city and to the many Denver residents who depend on it. What policies would you pursue in the City Council to promote a more affordable and accessible transportation system for all city residents? Mateos, we'll start with you.
Yes, Dominic, thank you for the invitation to be here, and thank you to all the candidates for being here as well. Yes, I think the question you ask is very important. I think as we look at how the city and county of Denver is growing tremendously, I think transportation and access to transportation is a key issue, and I think for the next city council, we will have to address that issue. And I think for me, it's really important that we in District 7 really focus on infrastructure, especially around the Alameda, Evans and Mississippi corridors, and make both the east side and west side of our community or our district more connected, so people have more access to the transit areas along Broadway. And I think that's going to be key, and that's what I want to focus on in terms of addressing not only that, but congestion as well. Getting folks to have alternatives to getting in their cars and going to work, but also being able to bike, walk, and also take our transit systems. And so I think addressing infrastructure is key and giving more access to those who live in District 7.
Lucia, your response to our public transportation question.
Well, RTD makes so little money off of its fares to begin with. My question is, why not just make it free, period, or so much little and less than what it is? And instead, they're jacking the prices up and they're eliminating transfers. And I just sent a letter in citing my objection to these price hikes. It affects me personally because my son takes the public transportation to and from school. But there are many cities where you don't pay at all, or you don't pay nearly as much. If they're not making money off of the fares, let's just make it truly public transportation, and if we can, subsidize it.
Jolyn.
Yeah, I think that creating the connections to our public transportation system and really getting closer to people's front door. So we have to address that last mile. And I think we really, especially in District 7, we have to bridge the gap between the west side and the east side. We have all kinds of communities on the west side that could almost pick up a rock and throw them to a light rail station, but getting there is very difficult. And so we have to create connections where we're not asking people to get in a car. Some of the time the problem is having enough cars in the family to get there where they can really get there. And so, through my work at the Greenway Foundation, we've been working on that regional trail down on the South Platte, and then working on where do we build those connections. So I think we need to, double down on that infrastructure piece and really build some bridges and some connections, because there are a lot of big barriers from the west side to the east side, and it's not going to be easy. But we've already gotten a bridge at Jewel for pedestrians and bikes in the Public Works Capital Improvement Plan. I've talked to the developers at the Alameda Station project about building that connectivity as part of their development, and also the development that's happening at Gates, talking to those developers about leveraging a partnership between the private sector and the public sector to get those dollars, going out to the philanthropic community to finish that and really get those projects built so that people can easily and safely get to the light rail that runs right through the middle of the district.
Aaron, your thoughts on our public transportation question?
This state has a nearly $1 billion funding gap in transportation funding. That's due to a number of different reasons. The gas tax is a dying mode of tax. One of the big failures is a failure of Congress to actually reauthorize a surface transportation bill. So the state and the regions and the transit agencies have to pull in stopgap measures to try and fund their agencies. So there's a failure at a national level to address transportation. At a local level, RTD is raising its fares because they don't want to cut back service. They have to make tough choices. I get that, but we need to come together as a region to make sure that we're developing partnerships and we're working politically, regionally, to find new ways to fund transportation. It's enough for all of us to talk about how much we want to increase service, but we're not talking enough about how we're going to pay for it. There have been a number of movements to try and increase sales tax to help RTD try and fulfill its promise on fast tracks. But in the meantime, where there's not a political will to do that, the city has to act, and we have to fill in gaps and supplant where RTD can, and that's a series of circulators, buzz buses, last mile connectivity. It's very critical. We've all talked about the lack of connection between the east to west side, and it's for good purpose. This is a critical issue in this race. We have to make sure the next council person and the council at large has to make sure that they're doing something to actually put their money where their mouth is on transportation.
Ian, go ahead and wrap it up for us.
Okay. For me, transportation is key. I think we need to be thinking about how do we deal with this today, the affordability, but then also the long-term infrastructure. And I think this is enhanced bus services. I think this is streetcars. I think this is bike lanes and better sidewalks. But in terms of the affordability, Seattle just passed a change in their law where if you make less than $23,000 a year, then you get a highly, highly diminished transit pass, and I think RTD could look at something like that. But I think RTD can only go so far, and I think the city of Denver needs to pick up the slack, and they're talking about it. And I think that could be a streetcar down Alameda, a streetcar down Broadway, and starting to really address the equity and give people better access to transportation, and then also in the process improve economic development, which hopefully will raise all boats.
Before we get to our second question, I want to remind all of our viewers that District 7 in the Denver City Council race actually has 9 candidates, and we are going to be hearing from all 9 candidates in this current half hour. You're hearing from the first 5 alphabetically, and then in our next half hour, you'll hear from the other 4. So please stay tuned. You'll be able to hear from all 9 candidates. Now to our second question. Denver is currently experiencing a shortage of affordable housing. If elected, what would you do to protect and increase the supply of affordable housing, specifically in light of the prospect of increased gentrification of some neighborhoods and along newly opened light rail lines? Let's switch up our order. Ian, let's start with you.
Sure. I think obviously affordable housing is a huge deal in Denver. And so for me, I think that we could address it in 2 separate ways. I think one could be a general fee that's associated with either new construction or remodeled construction, and I think that's one way. Another way could be Airbnb has come into Denver, and they have, let's say there's 1,000 houses that they're using for the short-term rentals. We could potentially put a fee on those Airbnbs as well that would feed into this general fund, which would help either supplement giving people a discounted apartment or potentially encourage developers to build larger, more dense buildings in specific areas within the city.
Aaron, your thoughts on affordable housing?
Yeah, so, look, this is a major issue in the race. We've all been talking about it a lot. This is not, first of all, it needs to be said that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're not just talking about subsidized affordable housing for low-income families. We're talking about attainable housing for working families, for young professionals, for millennials, and for young families that are trying to make a go of it here in Denver. People are making a conscious choice to move to the city. They want to live close to where they work. They want to enjoy all the things that you can in the city, and it's becoming increasingly unaffordable. We have talked at great detail about how we'd like to fund affordable housing in the city by both incentivizing attainable and affordable housing for developers through the code, also through making sure that we have actual dedicated revenue generator and source to actually subsidize affordable housing in the city. So, we're talking about things like mill levies, possibly, taking pieces and parts of different incremental revenue generators that can fund and make sure we have predictable funding for affordable housing. Very, very important. But we also want to make sure that when that housing's built, it's made from quality materials with quality workmanship, and that it fits the character of the neighborhoods.
Joel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is a huge issue for us, and it's an issue that hits home personally for me. My parents bought a house in Wash Park in 1969 for $10,500. And I grew up there, went to high school, went off to college, and my wife and I got married right out of college. We met at CSU, and when we came back, the prospect of affording, she's a public school teacher and I'm working for a nonprofit, of affording to live in the community where I grew up was impossible. And so, luckily we were able to, over time, work towards getting back into the community that I grew up in by starting with a small condo and building equity and taking that and moving up. But one of the things that you addressed in your question is the supply question, and I think that that's critical. I think that we do have to look beyond just the inclusionary housing ordinance and really find a dedicated source of revenue for affordable housing. But I think that we also have to fix the construction defects legislation. And I lived in a condo. I just said, my wife and I, when we were first married, and we had a suit against the builder for a defect in the first year we were married when she was still getting her teacher's license. So I'm very protective, making sure that we take care of consumers and that they have a way to fix what's wrong when things are not built right. But I think that we've swung too far and we need to get back to a balance, because we're not building any condominiums in Denver under $400,000 because the cost of insurance is so high. So it's not repealing that, but it's fixing it so that we have balance and so that we're once again building inventory. We're building places that first-time homebuyers can start building that equity and working their way in. I think that's a critical piece to the affordable housing conversation.
Lucia, your take.
Well, I think that we should have a small fee on every real estate transaction, and that fee can then go into a fund for affordable housing that can either go towards low-cost loans, subsidizing rents, or incentivizing developers to build low-cost housing. The inclusionary housing ordinance that we have now, while good on paper, doesn't work because the builder, all he has to do is build less than 30 units, and the builder doesn't have to apply the affordable units. And so you get a lot of development with 29 units or less on a spot that could handle a lot more. Also, the developer can either trade away these units to a different development, affordable units, or buy his or her way out of the development. So, and it's not consistent. You're only going to get revenue during boom times when there is development going on, but in times where there's maybe not as much new construction, but there are still real estate transactions happening, you can attach a small fee to that, and then you have a consistent source of revenue to help pay for those low-cost loans or rents or developments.
Okay. Mateos.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I moved to Denver 15 years ago was because of the affordability. I bought my first home here in Denver, and I'm thankful that I was able to do that. But that's becoming less and less attainable to more people who live here. And we've had a large influx of lots of folks moving here over the past decade or so, and that's not going to change for the next decade or so. As a matter of fact, we're going to have more people moving here. So I think this issue is crucial in terms of how we create the incentive for builders to build affordable units that are more attainable to the population who lives here and is moving here, but also the long-term residents, low-income, middle-income folks as well, and as others said, and for millennials as well. So I think we have to do more around public-private partnerships to create that revenue. While the inclusionary housing ordinance has been a good start, it hasn't been enough to provide more incentive for builders to build those affordable units in a strong way, so that we're using high quality material and we don't have these defects. And so I think, again, I support what the mayor has started as well in terms of a revolving fund that's being contributed to, so that we can begin to move towards creating more resources to get in front of the issue of growth.
I want to remind our viewers again, you're listening to the District 7 debate in the Denver City Council races, which there are 9 candidates. 5 of them, the first 5 alphabetically, have joined us right now. The other 4 will join us in our next half hour, so be sure to tune in for the entire thing to get to hear from all 9 candidates. Let's get to our next question. We like to thank the Denver Commission on Aging for submitting this one. What do you believe is the greatest barrier to older adults being able to age with dignity in their community? Joan, let's start with you.
Yeah, again, this is a question. I mentioned that my parents bought their house in Wash Park for $10,500 in 1969, and nearly 50 years later, they're still in that house and they're retired and both in their 70s. And one of the things that I fear, not just for them, but for all of the people in our community is their ability to stay in their home. This is a home that they built, they raised 5 children in, and that they're very happy in. But with the values in Denver going through the roof, the Denver Business Journal reported in February that the average home price across Denver was $390,000. Average, and in some areas it's much higher than that, and so those property taxes keep going up, and I think that we absolutely have to make sure that no one is forced out of their home, a home that is paid off free and clear because their property taxes have escalated and they're on a fixed income, they're retired. That just destroys our communities. It takes away, one of the great joys in my life is that returning back to the community that I grew up, my parents are there to help take care of my children, and that helps my wife and I be in that community too. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of people who want to age and live in their homes as long as they want to be there.
Aaron?
Seniors, especially on fixed incomes, they are faced with rising property tax rates that they have to deal with. That goes back to our question about affordability here in Denver and making sure that we have affordable options for people to live. It's one thing if you, bought a house in 1970 whatever in Wash Park, but if your property taxes has incrementally gone up every year, then you may not be able to afford to stay there. Increasingly, if you're a senior and you can't drive, then you need access to public transit. And if that's not predictable, then you're going to have some serious quality of life concerns. We have very serious problems with food deserts in this city, especially in the western part of the district, where it's not easy for someone who has limited mobility to access sources of healthy foods. It can be a lot more convenient to go to a corner shop, and thankfully there are people that are working on initiatives to bring healthy foods to those shops. But all of those things have to be addressed in order to help the quality of life for our seniors.
Ian?
So I do have to agree with both of these guys and what they've just said. So I'm going to go beyond that and talk about how I think community is something that is severely lacking for the aging population in Denver. I've walked so many doors where it's a woman or a man that's 70, 80, 90, and they just want to hang out and talk at the door because I'm the first person they've talked to in quite some time. And to me, that's sad, but it also, to me, lays out the fact that who's shoveling their driveways, who is taking them to the grocery store when they can't drive themselves, who's checking in on them if for some reason they take a fall. If their family lives in Ohio, how are they going to be taken care of? So I think that if we can find a way to really rally our communities to bring the aging population back into our communities and build these relationships, a lot of these issues that we're dealing with, they're not going to go away, but they can help, they can be supplemented by their neighbors, their friends of the neighbors, and really we can build something great if we just put our minds to it and bring our communities together.
Mateo?
Yeah, absolutely. A very important issue as well, and I believe I agree with everything that's been said as well. And I think it's important. I think the cost of buying or renting a home, I think, is the most important issue in addressing that issue, especially for seniors, in terms of making it more affordable for them. And also the food desert issue as well, I think, is really important, especially in certain parts of our district where I think it's more extreme than others. Very, very important. And even the affordability of food as well, and healthy food. And so I think in working or leading as a city council person on food co-ops and that bartering and trading within the neighborhood, I think is very important. I think city government can lead on that, help create infrastructure to make that more accessible to folks and make sure folks are following the rules in order to provide those opportunities to our senior citizens as well. And then I also think making, our city more walkable, I think, is important, and central, and where we have to drive to go to a supermarket or drive other places or to get across to Broadway, making those venues more local in our neighborhood. And when we plan, we plan for the future and including those perspectives and those needs of our senior population.
Hey, Lucia?
Well, this is a subject that's actually quite near and dear to my heart because I'm married to a senior citizen. He wouldn't like it that I said that, but it's true. And you know, we have a couple of kids, and we live in a very large house, and it's got a lot of stairs, and it's a lot big. When we're empty nesters, it's going to be a lot of house for 2 people. And I think to myself, you know, we have a lot of equity in the house, and it'd be nice to sell, but even if we sold it with all the equity, we would end up spending a lot of money to just get something smaller just within the city. So keeping people in their homes is nice, but also if they have the primary residence, make sure that the seniors are getting a discount on their taxes, which it's offered on your primary residence. If you've lived in your house for more than 10 years and you're a senior, whatever the level of senior is for this law. But other than that, everything everyone here has said on the panel is pretty spot on.
Well, it's not quite time for our closing statements yet, so I have a time for just a few quick answer questions. So this short answer to this one: should Denver revisit the sales tax charged on recreational marijuana? Mateos, we'll start with you.
Should they? Is this
Should we
a yes or
revisit
no?
the
or-
issue? Yes, no.
I think we
short
should
thought.
revisit the issue. I think everything should be on the table in terms of creating revenue for our city. We are a growing city, and there's needs in terms of what we need. There are lots of needs for for our growing city, and so I think we need to find creative ways in terms of getting those resources. And I think so. I would say yes.
Okay, Lucia.
Well, we need to look at how much of the sales tax is pushing people to the black market. If it's not, then we're fine. We've got lots of uses for that revenue. If it is pushing people to the black market, then maybe we need to rethink it.
Jolyn?
I think we've just started along this path, and we are generating a lot of good revenue for our city through that, and so I think it's okay where it is for now.
Aaron?
We also need to look at how we're spending that revenue. If we're using all of it to regulate marijuana in the cannabis industry rather than actually doing some public good that we had intended to do under the Amendment 64, then we definitely need to revisit it.
And Ian?
I think it's fine right now. I think we would be better off suited looking at the times that the marijuana shops close and adjusting them to our surrounding communities so that, again, we're not pushing it out to the black market.
Well, it is time now for our closing statements. We've asked all of our candidates to offer a 30-second closing statement. Before everything began taping today, we picked numbers out of a hat to pick our order. Mateos, you drew number 1, so you'll have our first 30-second closing statement.
Yes, my name again is Mateos Alvarez, and I'm a candidate for City Council District 7. And so I'm hoping to earn your support as we move forward to the May 5th election. I was born and raised in northern Colorado. I've been here in Greeley, or in Denver, or went to school in Greeley. I've been here in Denver for 15 years now in the Athmar neighborhood, along with my wife, Julie, our 2 daughters, and our 2 dogs, Logan and Luna. Worked in my community, in District 7 and surrounding communities for the last 15 years to address a variety of local issues and community issues, and I'm hoping to earn your support. So please vote for me on May 5th. Thank you.
And Aaron, you drew second, so you're our second 30-second closing statement.
Sure. So affordable neighborhoods, better transportation, safe communities for all, and a responsive government. Those are the things that I believe are most important in your next city council person. This is very much what we're focused on in this campaign. We have a plan to address all of those needs. We're very proud of the campaign that we've run. I'm a former congressional staffer, worked for Congressman Ed Perlmutter and Congressman John Salazar for a number of years. Today I'm a transportation professional with CDOT. Unifying communities around projects is what I do every day. I'd be more than proud to serve as the next District 7 City Council person, and you can learn more at grecofordenver.com.
Ian, you're up next.
Okay. Again, my name is Ian Harwick. For the past 10 years, I've been a small business owner. I've been the president of the Athmar Park Neighborhood Association. I've been an advocate for people with disabilities. And if I'm elected as your next city council member for District 7, I will continue to do those things. And beyond that, I will continue working on the Denver that we love and creating the Denver that we all want. So please vote Ian Harwick on May 5th or before, and ianfordenver.com.
Lucia, you're our next 30-second closing statement.
Hi, I'm Lucia Brown, and I am president of the Baker Historic Neighborhood Association, and I have been a neighborhood advocate for almost 20 years. I can point to things in the community that I've done, like bringing the Denver School of Science and Technology to the old Byers Junior High School that had been vacant for 10 years, leaving a hole in the neighborhood. In 2001, I helped defeat the jail that the city wanted to place at 6th Avenue and I-25. I got historic designation for the Baker neighborhood. I've worked on the Baker plan. So the downtown people have labeled me the neighborhoody candidate, and in fact, it's true. I am the neighborhood candidate, and I would love to represent you in your neighborhood. Lucia for District7.com.
And Jolene, your last closing statement.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Denver. I graduated from South High School. I have deep roots in this community, and I'm committed to this community long term. I spent my life working in Denver, working on projects along the South Platte River, including an outdoor learning park for kids that'll open this month, and working on bringing a free cultural facility to District 7 at Ruby Hill Park that'll provide 50 free concerts a year. I'm excited to get started, and I will be a strong voice and a strong advocate for the residents of District 7 if elected to Denver City Council.
Well, that is all the time we have for our first look at the Denver City Council race in District 7. I'd like to thank our candidates for joining us: Mateos Alvarez, Lucia Brown, Jolene Clark, Aaron Greco, and Ian Hardwick. Thank you very much for tuning in, but stick around to hear from the remaining 4 candidates running in District 7. Remember, there's 9 candidates in this race, and those other 4 are coming up next. For everyone here at Colorado Public Television and AARP, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.